Salt and Sanctuary is a pretty good game. It's solidly made, has a wealth of content, and pretty deep combat, especially considering it's made by just a few people. It's pretty fun to play, really, but I just don't get excited when I play it at all. I've put about 40 hours or so into the game, and it's just yet to make me really enthralled. It feels far too much like the game is just trying to be a 2D Dark Souls, and doesn't have enough of its own identity. Granted, I think the ways they solve some problems that come up by bringing that formula into 2D are very well handled here, and though it could be easy to compare it to a Castlevania game, it feels quite unique from that as well, as your character's attacks and abilities are pretty varied even from the start. The level design is pretty excellent overall, with constantly new level gimmicks, situations, or what have you. At first, it doesn't seem like they'd have anything like it, but there are some legit platforming sections that are actually pretty damn fun and challenging. Combat is pretty good and works very similar to Souls: block, parry, or dodge attacks, then counterattack. Aside from the standard weak enemies early on, most enemy types require some thought and patience to approach, though not as much as an actual Souls game, I feel. However, that's not to its detriment, as the speed of the game as a whole is definitely quite a bit faster. This feels like a result of the fact that it's even in 2D in the first place, and it doesn't feel like it's too much. The weapon variety is better than you would initially expect too, as weapons do actually feel different from each other. Even weapons in the same class have differences. For example, all normal swords are similar, but a straight sword type and a katana type do have different speeds, hitboxes, animations, and scaling. Although they don't feel anywhere near as different as the same kind of comparison in a Souls game, and in the long run they are still all normal swords. The actual different weapon classes are better as far as variety goes, though. The movesets themselves have less variety than I expected considering those points, but you have enough tools for any given situation, for any given weapon, so it's enough. Magic is actually probably more fun in this game than any Soulsborne game so far, excluding Dark Souls 3, since that's, well, kind of not out yet, simply because it's on a 2D plane. There's a lot of creative magic attacks, and the limits placed on casting in focus, which is basically MP, and simple casting time feel really fair. It's not only possible, but actually really fun to play a solo magic build in this game, even if you normally don't care for such things. It actually gives the game a bit of a Mega Man feel, as you approach all of the fights differently, from range, manually aim your attacks, and tend to dodge stuff just by jumping, since you don't want to be near enough to enemies that you'd need the dodge roll anyway. So, I mean, yeah, it's a very good 2D action RPG. But I can't stand the art at all. It just looks horrible to me and passable at best. Now, because, from what I can tell, they only have one artist, I can completely understand that there is no way the art could have been mind-blowing in the first place, considering the amount of content, but it just looks bad on a fundamental level. The character art design is just wonky in its proportions. The large heads with exaggerated features and hunched-over cartoonish look clashes severely with the medieval and sometimes horrific visuals of the game, I feel. Some of the creatures look okay, but still don't actually look well drawn, like from a technique standpoint. I'm not even talking about the actual elements of the design, but simply how they're actually drawn. The bosses have some of the same issues, where the humanoids have weirdly cartoonish proportions, while the creatures just look sort of half-finished. If you've seen one of their previous games, The Dishwasher, I think you can see almost instantly that their art style hasn't changed, and I'm assuming they probably like their style as is. I will say that it does feel like it's matured, and certainly is their best looking game by far, but I don't see how it fits a game like this at all. Not once was I able to just get submerged into the game and its world, because I kept getting dragged out to reality by looking at the art. It doesn't help at all that the music is basically non-existent, and what is there is nothing more than background music, or just not interesting in the case of, say, the boss music. Still, as long as you have even a bit of interest in action RPGs, I would totally recommend the game. In fact, there's no one in particular I wouldn't recommend the game to, even people who I would expect would hate the art. It still has a lot of good things going for it, and most probably won't feel as strongly negatively as I do about certain aspects of it. In my case, it's just not compelling enough in the long run without a world that can be truly engrossing to me.